Greetings to you. My name is Tara Brabazon and I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies at Charles Darwin University. And welcome to Outrider 5, Surviving and Thriving Through Research Training. And the attention on that last word is important, but all will be revealed shortly. This Outrider comes via request from Gina, and I will actually read the request to you. Quote, "What is the reality of PhD training these days? Almost feels like a scam. Signing on for multiple years onto PI's multiple projects, being given predetermined outcomes, doing quick, cheap experiments, manipulating the results for impact, writing papers for the PI, and then being dropped when the candidature ends. In former times, PhD was about training to become a researcher with critical thought ability, methodological consideration, originality, independence. We are now chickens producing eggs, and whoever produces the most eggs gets the glory and the academic job." End of quote. When Gina sent me this message, I was obviously incredibly upset, worried, disturbed, frightened. And obviously I was also then a bit concerned about the nostalgia about the previous times, because obviously the previous times were rubbish, just in different ways. But I also wanted to take Gina's commentary incredibly seriously and unpick it, really unravel it, and also for all of you, and I'm sure there are tens of thousands of you that agree with Gina, for the tens of thousands of people who are being treated pretty disgracefully at the moment, have lost their will, have lost their hope, I'm going to, for the first time in this series, present Tara's 10 tips. Tara's 10 tips for not only surviving research training, but also thriving through it. So if you're in a bad place now, one of the things I'm going to talk about in the next little bit, I hope will be of use to you. I'll be able to mentally, intellectually, personally, professionally get you out of this situation. Now, throughout this particular Outrider, I've presented training in inverted commas, like it's not 1993 where every second word has inverted commas. But look, I've critiqued the notion of research training for 20 years, and as always in everything, I have lost that battle over and over again. But I've always been critical of the phrase research training. Do you notice it's not research education? Do you notice it's not a description of research, teaching and learning? Do you notice it's not a discussion of PhD andragogy? And yes, can I say that's a car starting, welcome to my new environment. This is my next temporary accommodation. Isn't it going well? But can I say training is a really problematic word in this context. PhD training is a really simple phrase. And it simplifies the really complicated relationships between epistemology, methodology, ontology, and also it sort of blocks a discussion of axiology as well. So it's the gift that keeps on giving. But it also stops us thinking about the relationship between theory and methods, having overt and clear ethics conversations, thinking through academic conduct and academic misconduct, thinking about authorship in a productive way, but also any discussion of teaching and learning, whether it be research design, universal design, setting up and organising assessment, SOTL, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, or SOS, the Scholarship of Supervision. Now, so very simple phrase. You'll also notice that the really complicated discussions about career development are not being had. So how do we as academics manage this sort of environment in which to work? How do we manage the casualised work, the really, really ruthless contract work, the lack of permanence, the lack of stability? How do we try and sustain friendships and keep our family reasonably happy during these truly appalling times? How do we think about national and international mobility? So how do we move when we have to get work? And finally, thinking through how do we feel in relation to industry partnerships, collaborations and internships, noting that so many of our students are over the age of 30, 40, 50, 60 and 70 and are already in full-time work. Yeah. So as you can see, that's just a few topics that are excluded from our discussion of research training. There are thousands of others, and I hope we'll talk about a lot of them through this Outrider series. But you can see that describing any of this stuff as research training is incredibly reified and simplistic. This is research education. This is teaching and learning about research, and that is a completely different thing. Therefore, the supervisors and the advisors that Gina talked about in that absolutely tragic message to me use that phrase research training. Research training is in the interest of incompetent supervisors because it simplifies what they have to do. It suggests they're not teachers, that there's no andragogical component to what supervisors are doing because it's about research training. And it really transforms research and research education into a connect the dots exercise, and it was never meant to be this. A research education does not allow the truncation of the creation of data sets. It doesn't allow the fabrication of data sets, the bending of interpretations. There is nothing in research that is a colour by numbers exercise. The point of research, the very definition of research, colleagues, is that we don't know what we're going to discover. If we know what's going to happen, that's the next episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. So that's about shade, slamming doors, having a Chardonnay. We know what we're going to expect when we see an episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. We have no idea what we're going to see and think about when we're in a research project because we don't know what the outcomes would be. That's what research is. Now, I know, I know how incredibly common bad research and bad supervision is. I remember this has been the nature of a lot of my jobs in the last 20 years. So I know exactly how poor a lot of PhD supervision is. I really do. But also, can I say it's a personal experience for me as well. All my masters and my PhD, I also suffered from personally, truly appalling supervisors. Didn't meet with me at all, didn't read a word of it, and more importantly, proceeded through my life and my career to block any achievements. If they had an opportunity to do me damage through my career, those PhD and research masters supervisors, they did do damage. And to make it even worse, they didn't just try and damage me, they also overtly damaged my late husband, Professor Steve Redhead. So when they had an opportunity to damage him, they took those opportunities. So I personally get how really debilitating and disgraceful this situation is. I get it. So if you're in those nightmares that Gina has talked about, I hear you, I see you. Now we could sit in that pain, or I can come up with 10 tips, Tara's 10 tips to help you get your brain right, get your consciousness right, and move you mentally, personally, intellectually, and emotionally through and out of this situation. Now, number one, Tara's 10 tip 1. Get out of the bad supervision what you can. I know that seems a really counterintuitive first point, but let's go there. In many cases, what we've got here is that the bad supervisors are simply paper mill producers. Seen this thousands of times. So what happens is they get themselves a cohort of PhD students, and the sole purpose of these PhD students is to pump out papers where the supervisor has an authorship credit on those papers. Yep. Now, if that's the deal, then acknowledge that, and you know what? Get those papers. Those papers will help your CV. They will. But also be aware that this Fordist mode of supervision will not provide you with most of the attributes and the characteristics you're going to need on your CV for a successful career. So the rest of the tips in this Outrider are going to give you those. But the singular truth of a PhD supervisor that is completely narcissistic and self-absorbed and only interested in their publications is to, in many ways, use them as well and use that paper mill to build up your CV and your number of articles. Now, the only caveat to my acknowledgement of this Fordist paper mill supervision is number 2, and this is even more important. Here we go. Be clear on authorship, research conduct and integrity, and yes, research misconduct. We're going there. Research has 3 parts to it: research design, data collection and data analysis, and also substantive writing and editing, all 3. To be an author on a refereed piece of work, a research output, you must have contributed to 2 of those 3 attributes. As an author of an article, and this is quite important, can I say, as an author of an article, you can't say after it's published, oh, you know what, I don't really agree with that. See that section? Nah, I don't agree with that. Sorry, by the Australian Code of Research Conduct, if you're listed as an author on that article, then you agree with it. You have agreed to be an author. You have agreed that the research is of quality. So please be careful here, because you can see what's going to happen. Because during this process of writing an article, you need to check. Even if you didn't do the experiments, have you checked the lab books? Even if you didn't do the field work, have you checked those field work notes? You need to be able to verify each stage of the research, even though you didn't do it personally. And how often does that happen? And I tell you why it needs to happen. Because I have seen some absolutely horrific cases in my career where authors have only discovered a problem in their research when peer reviewers, through a journal submission, pick up the fabrication of data. And then they write directly to the university, and then you can imagine what occurs. So this is incredibly serious. So don't let this be you. And I tell you what, you should be scared. You might be going, oh, I haven't checked those lab notes. Yeah, you should be frightened. You should check everything. If you haven't checked everything and verified it, you should be concerned, because something can happen. Now, if you are frightened and concerned, it is important to acknowledge that, because we all should be frightened. If you're not verifying those data sets and that interpretation, and you're adding your name as an author, yeah, nah. So if you've got a concern, every university around the world has an Office of Research and Innovation. We have ORI at Charles Darwin University. You got me. So please use me. Talk about overtly and understand the responsibilities of authorship. If you can't verify the data set, if you don't agree with the interpretation, then do not add your name to the article or the output. This can end very badly. Let me tell you of a recent example that happened to me, and this shows you the scope and scale of this. So I had written a chapter completely on my own, 100% on my own. I'd written this chapter for this book. Then one of the other authors of one of the other chapters, without asking me or telling me or any engagement with me at all, did an inverted commas draft of my chapter, added 4 sentences and a couple of references that were dreadful, dated, and also I just simply couldn't live with. It was a particular rendering of identity politics that I find quite embarrassing. So I simply could not add my name as an author to the piece that I had written after this other person had added these 3-4 paragraphs and a couple of references. So on a piece I wrote, I pulled out of that project and stated very clearly to that other writer that I have removed all their commentary and I will go my own way and publish it on my own terms. That's authorship. These are tough decisions. These are dreadful decisions. That was 3 months of my life that I lost. But that's why authorship matters. 3, participate in institutional activities. This is crucial. If your supervisor does not promote or does not provide professional development activities, you need to use your department, your research centre, your university, and indeed outside the institution to gain that PD. What I did when I was a PhD student, what I do to this day, is I give myself a target number of professional development activities every single year. So say you give yourself a target of 10. Every year of my PhD, I'll do 10 PD events. They may be about publishing, they may be about methods. Now, I think students make mistakes because they assume, right, well, I need to do PD absolutely on the tiny little topic that is my PhD. Unless the PD's on this tiny little topic that I do in the PhD, then it's not relevant. That is nonsense. You must go beyond your thesis and gain professional development. If you're going to get jobs, your jobs are not going to be on the tiny little area of the PhD. So be expansive, create a learning environment around you, and give yourself 10 professional development targets to do each year. Add those to your CV and you're winning. Terrific. 4, same thing. Use MOOCs and self-directed learning for micro-learning and nano-learning events. I do 1 hour of LinkedIn learning every single week, and last year was a big year for me. I did 6 certificates. So I was learning the methodologies of coaching, which I really enjoyed, and I, of course, trained as a certified death doula. Really enjoyed all those qualifications enormously. But there are so many free learning opportunities available. So take 30 minutes every single week and do a bit of a nano learning event. I do my sessions now on Sunday mornings. Saturday mornings I record this session, but Sunday mornings I go to the gym, get myself a really big cup of coffee when I come home, and sit down and do some LinkedIn learning. And so every Sunday morning is a learning experience for me. If my well has been sort of depleted through the week of work, I'm able to build that well back up on a Sunday. So this could be learning a new bit of software, which is always great. It could be approaching a different way of working. I've done a lot of LinkedIn learning recently on new theorizations of remote learning after COVID, for example. There's some fantastic LinkedIn learning on that. But also EDI, quality, diversity, inclusivity training, excellent. Again, add this to your CV. All of this renders your career outward. That's the point. 5. Here we go. Use social media to meet and greet emerging academics. Some of you may know I developed a few years ago now, a new model for thinking about the world, let alone learning, and it's called 3Ds: digitisation, disintermediation, and deterritorialisation. So it's a new way of thinking about how life operates, to be frank. And it's the disintermediation bit that interests me the most for helping you today. And what disintermediation is it's removing the links in the supply chain between producers and consumers. So let me give you an example. In the old days, say 20 years ago, a band would record a song in a record company's studio, right? And they would record something in the studio, and then it would be mixed, and then it would be mastered and engineered and pressed in a different factory on a particular platform, so tape or vinyl or a CD, for example. And then people would design the cover, they would do a marketing campaign, and this product would end up in a shop that was called a record shop. And then somebody would walk in and buy that CD, that vinyl, that tape. So as you can see, this is a heavily layered structure between producers and consumers. Now, what digitisation has done in most industries is remove some or indeed all of those layers. So, for example, Lewis Capaldi records something in his front room, or indeed more likely in his parents' front room, and then proceeds to release it on TikTok, release it on YouTube, release it on Twitter. That is disintermediation. And this is also true for academic life, colleagues. It really is. Because, yes, the power of the gatekeepers are reducing. You can contact and follow the best academics in the world on Twitter and LinkedIn. Your supervisor is no longer the gatekeeper of who you meet. You don't need your supervisor at a conference to introduce you to the important people. You can independently configure a disintermediated intellectual life and build up your relationships. 6, use employment services and the support of friends. Jobs are scarce. All jobs are scarce, inside and outside our universities. And of course, nepotism rules. We will never know how many of the jobs that are advertised are already filled. We'll never know. And I've certainly got some absolutely shocking stories that I could share with you. And yes, probably I will share with you through this Outrider series. My favourite ones involve a mate, nepotism, a mate being put into an acting position. And then magically about 3, 4, 5, 6 months later, the job is advertised. But you know what? The person that was acting in the position, you could hire anybody in the world. But bizarrely, Phil, who just works down the corridor, managed to get this job. And the bizarre thing is, he's already acting in the position. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, right. But of course now employment itself has become disintermediated. We have all those alt-ac or alt-ACA groups. So please look for the alternative academic groups throughout social media, incredibly important. Now, we've also got incredible groups of women, men, trans, non-binary identifying, gay, lesbian, fantastic groups that are supporting people moving into a job, and they're great. But alongside, of course, LinkedIn and Seek. So get in there. Come on. Let's all make a decision today to apply for jobs. And lots of them. And I understand how, I really do, how horrific it is to apply for 100 jobs and only one of those people ever even replies to acknowledge that you're alive. But you know what? Let's fight this. Let's prove them wrong. Let's give them a field for every single job. So if they're going to use nepotism, then they're going to have to do it over our bodies. We're going to have a field and they're going to have to do it anyway. And you know what? When you do this, every now and again, something's going to surprise you. There's going to be a job without a field and you've applied and you're going to get it. So most supervisors do not have the scope and the scale of the connections that they talk about. Trust me, so many academics go, oh, I know everybody. Dude, you live in Dubbo, mate. You don't know everybody. Sort yourself out, right? So be very, very clear on this, colleagues. Your supervisors don't know everybody. That's just talk. You start to introduce yourselves to others and use the capacity of social media. And you do this particularly by working on your CV every single week. Right. Now, 7. Speaking of working on your CV, 7. Here we go. If you get nothing else out of this week, get this one. Learn to teach. Learn to teach. The great lie of academic life, and there are thousands, but the great lie of academic life is that a PhD program teaches you how to teach. There is absolutely nothing, zero. There is nothing in a PhD program that teaches you how to teach, how to create learning outcomes, how to create assessment outcomes, how to backwardly map. It doesn't teach you any of this. If you want to learn to teach, then you have to do 2 things. The first thing you have to do is you have to do qualifications in education. Now, the day after I finished my PhD, and I'm not actually joking, the day after I finished my PhD, I enrolled in a Bachelor of Education course. And it was a great course and it changed my life. If you don't want to do that sort of thing, then enroll in a series of micro-learning events so that you learn how to teach. Learning to teach requires expertise, and that's one thing. So you've got to get expertise. You've got to know what you don't know and start to know what you know, right? Get some qualifications in it. 2, you also gain expertise in teaching and learning through experience, and you need that as well. So approach every single human being that you know at the university and explain, you know what, hi, I'm up for it. I'm really interested in being involved in university teaching. So have you got any demonstrating tutoring? Do you need anybody to run your online forum? So you need as many lines in your CV as possible. So diversify your experience. Now, a series of people want you to teach one course for 4 years because that helps them, because you're experienced and you can take the burden off them. That's not in your interest. Your interest is every teaching experience that you have adds a new line to your CV. So make sure you do that. And the reason I'm so fixated on the importance of teaching is because teaching pays the bills of our universities. Everyone goes on and on and on about research, right? But teaching pays the bills of our universities. All of us, therefore, have to scrap a living together. There is no tenure. There's no permanence. Even if you think you're on tenure and you think you're permanent, we're all one day away from being sacked. We're all the precariat now. But the way that you build a living, and you notice I didn't say make a living, the way that you build a living is through teaching. Now, we may be lucky and find a teaching and research role, what's called a balanced academic role, but there's very few of those anymore. You may be lucky, and I hope you will be. But so many of my friends, my truly brilliant, talented, remarkable friends, are currently on 3 or 4 part-time contracts where they're 3 and 4 days and nights away from their family every single week. And these are brilliant people that, you'd think would be in a permanent tenure job. They're nowhere near that, but they are teaching and they're making a living at often 3 different universities each week. They are building a living. And you know what? That building of a living may come from research contracts, but not in the way that you think. Someone gets a research contract and then they have to do something called backfilling. So someone is off, they're gone for a year to go and do some sort of research thing, bless them, good on you, and somebody has to do their teaching. So that's called teaching backfill, and that's how most of us get work. My first full-time academic job was exactly that. I had 6 weeks notice. So a guy got a year's gig in the United States from Outrider, New Zealand. And so my first job was with 6 weeks notice, moving countries and teaching large first year courses and others, right? So it was an incredible experience. I loved doing it, but it was tough. It was really, really hard. But that is how I got my first job, teaching backfill. That is how we build a living. But with the casualisation of the entire sector, make sure, please, that you do not do not forget about teacher education, and you don't forget about andragogy. Get the skills, get the expertise, get the experience, because it's teaching that will enable you to build a living. 8, befriend librarians. Some of the brightest people on our university campuses, and that's all university campuses, can I say, are librarians. You've heard me say thousands of times, they are the Jedi Knights of higher education. So start your candidature by meeting your subject librarian. And please, as early as you can, download the library training suite, all the training that they're going to deliver through the year. What people forget about librarians, and it's a disgrace to be honest with you, is at its minimum, librarians possess a bachelor and a master's degree. They are incredibly experienced and incredibly qualified people, and their specialism is information literacy and information management. And during their remarkable master's degree, the Master of Librarianship often, or information systems, they are taught how to disseminate what they know. So that's why probably the best presentations I've ever seen in the universe have been from librarians. So please seek them out. If you want to understand the world, if you want to gain professional development, you want to be able to put on your CV that you have expertise in systematic reviews and scoping reviews, and you've so far moved beyond the beige literature review, then you want to work with an array of software packages, then you know what, meet your librarian, download their training suite for the year, and go. go and add those lines to your CV. It'll change your life. 9, maintain deep friendships with peers. If you've got a supervisor who is selfish and self-absorbed, and you're really doing everything for them, and I'm sure there's a lot of you out there, the key strategy is to maintain and to build friendships with your peers. So if there is that cohort of PhD students all working for this supervisor, then you know what? All of you should bind together, create a friendship, and work out strategies to develop your career together. I've often called those the supergroup. So if you are, say, on your own, or there's only 1 or 2 in a lab or fieldwork, or with a particular supervisor, make sure that you're building relationships with other groups in the cohort. And I often call that supergroup development, and that can be transformative as well. These friendships and relationships are important. In fact, they're everything. The supervisor may neglect you, the supervisor may exploit their academic community. But you know, the best way to counter that is to build friendships. These friendships will last you through your career, and these people will also enable your career. You'll look out for each other. And the reason I'm still upright and I'm still surviving is because of the friends I've made very early in my career. Jackie Hewitt, looking at you, girl, looking at you. We're still here, mate. We're still alive. Yeah. So all the focus at the moment is, the supervisor needing to find the student work. But actually, you know what? That's not how you get work. It's your peers. It's your network of friends who go, I think there's something happening over there. I think there's going to be an application. I think. That's how you start to build a living. Don't put all your energy and your attention on this supervisor, right? Supervisors are not gods. We're not messiahs. We're not Isaac Newton. We're not even Lynn Siegel or Gerald Early. We are nothing. We are all #randoms until proven otherwise. But you need to build those friendships, learn together, and look after each other. Yeah, they are networks that will enable your career. Trust me on that one. From an old lady, trust me on that one. 10, final one, we got there. Come on. Last one, this is it. Maintain courage and compassion. For me, that combination is what enables survival in academic life. It's courage, you've got to be courageous, but you've got to have compassion as well. You've got to back yourself. You've got to believe in yourself. You've got to have some courage. And I know as the world is tough and everything we believe in, everything that's important, seems to be melting around us. I get that. I understand. I've lived, team, the fear and the horror and the confusion. I understand what it's like to be worn down by rubbish people and rubbish behaviour. I get it. I understand when you wake up morning after morning after morning and you just want to give up. I get that. But to get through Gina's, quote, scam of research training, end of quote, we have to show courage. But you know how we show courage? We show courage by continuing to learn and continuing to be outward rather than inward on the all little internal, institutional politics. Push yourself outward. And you push yourself outward with honesty and decency and rigour. Let's open ourselves to learning every single day and be grateful, and I know there are terrible days where you go, I just prefer to be dead than here, and I get that. I've lived that for years. You know what, this is so hard. I'd prefer to be dead than here. I get that. But you know what, we've got to move beyond that and treat the day as a gift. You know why it's a gift? Because the day is a gift because I can learn something. Today is a gift because you can learn something, okay? And show courage even when we're knocked down, time and time again. Get yourself up again. Come on. because you matter. You matter because you're learning. Courage is only one part of it though, because I understand the toughest thing to do in a ruthless, narcissistic, dreadful bullying environment is to show compassion, because you're just trying to survive, right? How can you show compassion? But I particularly want you to show compassion to the people that are doing the dirty on you. Let me explain. Those supervisors, those researchers that are taking shortcuts, often contravening policy and procedure, and trust me, they will be done for that, but they're running groups of PhD students into the ground. Those people, they were once great researchers like you, with hope and optimism and faith in the future. But like Anakin Skywalker, there was good in them. And then, of course, they became Darth Vader. Now, we avoid moving from Anakin to Darth Vader when we balance that courage with compassion. We don't have to agree with people. We don't have to follow in the pathway of Gina's, quote, scam supervisor, end of quote. But we can understand in what I've described as the claustropolitan university, how these people emerge. These people emerge because it's logical. Our university culture respects and promotes and verifies the brutish, the bullying, the ambitious, the nasty, the self-absorbed. Our system promotes the self-absorbed people. But this doesn't mean that we become that. We must balance courage with compassion. So when we make a decision to balance courage and compassion, we can change the world and we can change how our universities are, and certainly what they will become. And team, remember, those scam supervisors that you're talking about, I've personally experienced, right? That is my story. I get this because that's my story. Never saw them, completely selfish, completely self-absorbed, and frankly had absolutely no idea what they were doing. And through their career, if they could hurt me, they did. And the reason for that, and again, I haven't forgiven them. I don't do that. I think they are terrible human beings, right? But I understand them now because they got promoted above their ability. Can you understand the fear of being an academic, being a professor? Ooh, look at me. And you're in that position, and yet you know you're a pretender. You know that actually you haven't got the talent and the ability that everybody else around you thinks you do. Can you imagine how that would feel? And that's what creates the brutishness and the bullying and the brittleness, so that they are not found out. But I took all those dreadful experiences and I made a decision, and I hope you share this decision with me. And I made a decision to not replicate those behaviours. To quote the legendary Mia Angelou, when we know better, we do better. So let's be part of this generational transformation of research culture. And let's replace research training every time with a research education. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.